Most of us have at some point looked up at the sky in awe of its beauty. And though it is true that the sheer scale and complexity of space is wonderful, it can be equally terrifying. And for many people, it can even make them question their significance. I have also fallen into this frame of thought in the past. I even contemplate upon it today. However, I would like to propose that despite our deepest doubts, humans are at the end of the day truly important. Not only in a subjective, anthropic sense, but even on a cosmic scale. But before I move on to my arguments, it is important to see why people find this form of nihilism reasonable. So let's look at the four major arguments. The first and obvious one is that of size. We know, thanks to science, that compared to the entire universe, our planet is nothing more than a dot. Something so small that even attempting to call it significant seems ridiculous. Secondly, there is the problem of time. Because how can we claim to be the masters of a world in which we have only been existing for a fragment of a second? How could we dare to find confidence in ourselves when we know how much we have not seen? These first two observations can be put plainly with the following sentence. Man is too small and too young to be taken seriously on a cosmic scale. He is the slave of the four dimensions. Moving on from the dimensional issues, there is also the problem of evolution. For if all species come from the same common ancestors and are brought about by the same process, it would be unreasonable to assume that humans are superior to other species. It would be logically incoherent to call him unique. The fourth and final point is that of sin. Even if one manages to look beyond the physical incompetence of man, one still faces man's spiritual and moral incompetence. That is, humanity is filled with arrogance and resentment. But not only that, it is also conscious of it. After contemplating all this, one then has to ask, is that it? Is it simply a fact that the human species has no significance? That we simply assume it just to feel better? Is it really all empty? The answer is no, and I can prove it. In order to explain, I'm going to split my argument into 4 key points, so without further ado, let's begin. Point 1. Intelligence. As obvious as it may seem, many tend to forget just how improbable our intellectual capacity is. I mentioned before how all creatures come about through the process of evolution. But then, doesn't it look peculiar that there has not been a single form of life to even come close to the complexity of our brains? And not only that, but we are totally capable of using that intellect to explore the content of our world in almost ridiculous levels of detail. The most obvious manifestation of that fact is science. With millions upon millions of species, we are probably the only ones to calculate and explain our surroundings accurately. But we are also the only ones to possess the almost unbelievable power of intuition. This basically means that we have such awareness of the material world that we can instantly sense what works and what doesn't. Our communication skills reflect those truths as well. There are hundreds of complex languages in all parts of the world. with each one capturing its own meanings and emotions. Even the most cynical materialists have to admit the sheer mysteriousness of how language appeared. And most scientists agree that the evolutionary step happened very abruptly, as if it came into existence out of nowhere. Simply put, our intellectual capacity is one of the most special characteristics, and it separates us from all else. Point 2. Consciousness. A lot can be said about consciousness, with almost no one being in agreement with another about its true nature and its function. But what seems to be evident about it is that man is able to understand the existence of his own self. He is not only able to understand things, but he is able to understand the fact that he is in the process of understanding. Another way in which consciousness appears in our lives is through conscience, or in other words, through understanding one's wrongfulness and being capable of sensing one's responsibilities. The great thing about consciousness is that, unlike intelligence, it has never been recreated. It seems to be something unique to being truly alive, something unique about not being bound to an algorithm. This also leads one to the realization of free will. In other words, one's ability to choose how to interact with the world when every other interaction seems to be predetermined. Unlike the movements of the stars, which can be predicted if enough knowledge is acquired, a person's thoughts and ideas can never be precisely predicted. They can be altered by the self through the shaping of his conscious and unconscious desires, making man once again special. Point 3. Beauty and art. This is a very personal argument, for I am someone who is truly fascinated by the very nature of beauty. I would say that our ability to create art is one of the biggest mysteries in the world, because it means that we can use our intellect and our consciousness together in order to take steps into the abstract, into the unknown. And then we can take the abstraction and give it an appropriate symbol. A symbol whose pattern can be intuitively understood despite the fact that it is trying to depict truths that are almost impossible to articulate. I can also speak from personal experience when it comes to this point, because I have been writing literature for the last 1.5 years, and I can safely say that using language to connect to the unknown with the known is extremely difficult, and it can only be accomplished through a true artistic understanding, through a very careful formulation and words, which basically means constructing a symbol, or more accurately, a map of symbols. It is only through the lens of beauty that man can comprehend the rhythm of existence. Now this is something that no one can be cynical about, and it brings me nicely to my final point. Point 4. The realm of the religious. No, I'm not only talking about the existence or non-existence of God. I'm talking about the way in which humans can experience the world in a transcendent manner. What does it mean to have a transcendent experience? The best way I can put it is that one connects different parts of his intellectual ability with parts of his consciousness and parts of his connection to beauty. And he aligns these three in such a way that he not only dances with the unknown, but that he can even sense the harmony of that dance. He can have real moments of comprehension with the metaphysical, whatever that may be. And it seems so strange that a being that is bound by the laws of matter can even conceptualize that which is beyond it. That he can even conceptualize the imperfection of his perception. Think about people like Jung or Hegel. People who can distinguish the possibility of reality with the necessity of their subjective perception. No matter how intelligent a computer becomes, even if one day it has feelings, it could never be in line with such ideas, for they would be outside his realm of thought, basically by definition. But not only can humans think and feel things about such conceptions, but they can literally come to contact with them through what many call a transcendent or religious experience. In moments where being seems indistinguishable to understanding, in moments where one is truly aware of the higher beauty and thus becomes one with it, he becomes whole and one at the same time. And no matter how small we are, how imperfect and insignificant we may seem, it is true that we are the only ones that have that gift, the gift of fighting to reach divinity.